Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris in this election.
Good day, everyone. I'm Andrea Mitchell in Washington, where we are watching two major legal stories on both coasts. Here in D.C., Donald Trump's legal team and prosecutors for special counsel Jack Smith facing off in federal court for the first time since that Supreme Court decision throwing out a lot of the critical evidence in the case, granting the president immunity from those issues. But we begin in Los Angeles, where Hunter Biden has just walked into a federal courtroom, and his lawyer says he plans to change his plea in that criminal tax trial. Joining me now from outside the courthouse in L.A., NBC News senior investigative producer Sarah Fitzpatrick, NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli in Wisconsin, while in D.C., NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney is outside the federal courthouse, just blocks from here, as is MSNBC's legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance is also joining us. So, Sarah Fitzpatrick in L.A., let's start with you. Let's bring us up to speed on those charges and the trial. A big change, breaking news this morning.
Absolutely. It was a kind of shocking moment in the courtroom. What started out as what appeared to be kind of par for the course. The judge started discussing jury selection, how it would work, how they would move jurors between different rooms. And then Hunter Biden's attorney, Abby Lowell, stood up and said that they would not need to proceed to that because Hunter Biden intended to change his plea, that he intended to change his plea to what's known as an Alford plea, in which the defendant accepts the sentence but does not indicate that they are guilty or do not believe that they are guilty of the crime. It's a unique plea, but it is part of the Justice Department handbook and has been applied in other cases. Prosecutors appeared to have been caught completely off guard. There was kind of some dramatic talking in the courtroom. They said this is the first we're hearing of this. And the two parties, the prosecution said that they needed time to discuss, and the two parties right now are deferring and are expected to be in recess until about 11 a.m. local. Abby Lowell indicated that it was a relatively straightforward process, this Alford plea, and that he expected that it could be done by the end of the day. We're going to have to wait and see if exactly that happens. It's our understanding from looking at the law that there are some elements that need to happen before that could take place, and that will require some discussion between the prosecution and the defense. But it was a very, very dramatic moment that appears to have caught everyone off guard. We had some indication, though, that something might be afoot. Earlier this morning, there was a meeting. Hunter Biden walked into the courtroom, and the press was not allowed to walk inside. And we were told by the marshal that it was a private meeting with the judge. That lasted for some period of time. And then, at some point, a member of the prosecution team wheeled in a large cart that was full of binders and other trial prep materials, walked into the courtroom, and then about 5 minutes later walked out. When I followed her out and asked why she was doing that, she said she did not know and did not have any comment. So it is a dramatic course of events here, and I think a indication that the defense did not feel that they wanted to go through what was expected to be a very lengthy, a very embarrassing, and a very expensive trial. He was facing 9 different counts, 3 felonies, 6 misdemeanors for failing to pay taxes, for submitting a false or fraudulent tax form. And it was expected to kind of lay out a lot of his most embarrassing details about drugs, purchases of escorts, other sex club memberships. Members of his family or former family were expected to testify. And so I think that this plea is an indication that at the very last moment, there was a decision that going to trial was just not worth it, and that a plea and possible jail time was a better fit. Andrea?
Sarah, thank you so much. Mike Memoli. This, of course, spares the Biden family more salacious details coming out of the trial. I think you're in Wisconsin, where the president is going to be heading shortly. And, you know, he's got events there today, obviously on the campaign trail as a surrogate today. But the Biden family, even though he's no longer the candidate, this was going to be a big campaign issue. You know that.
Yeah, that's right, Andrea. In fact, President Biden today launching something of a new and final phase of his presidency, as he describes himself as the busiest surrogate for Vice President Kamala Harris. We saw them together, obviously, earlier this week in a campaign context in Pittsburgh. Today, he was using an event here in rural Southwest Wisconsin to talk about the ways in which his agenda has delivered for even those kinds of voters who didn't support him. But, Andrew, when we think back into the context of the previous trial, when President Biden was still an active candidate, we saw just how, not just politically potentially that was disruptive for his campaign, but just how damaging it was to the family, how wrenching it was to have the First Lady of the United States attending most of the days of that trial, at one point flying to and from France twice to be there for her son, other members of the family there to be in support of him, to have to see members of his family, including his ex-wife, his own daughter, testify against and on his behalf. This was a really wrenching moment for the family. And as soon as that guilty verdict came down, the questions were immediately looking ahead to this trial, knowing, as Sarah just laid out, some of the details that would emerge, some of the topics that would be discussed, the questions that would be asked would be more embarrassing, more difficult, more personally problematic for the Biden family. Was there any way to avoid this second trial coming to be? There had been very little indication that a guilty plea or some sort of change in plea might be coming, but this was something that I think many people in and around the president who have been watching this all play out without the ability to maybe influence events. This has been a family matter that has been handled entirely within the family. I would certainly be relieved. We saw the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday asked about this, and she once again said this is that Hunter Biden is a private citizen, this is a private matter, and that they would not comment. So if this goes forward, and that's a big if, Andrea, because we've been down this road before, right? We have saw Hunter Biden attempt to go in with a plea agreement with the government that fell apart under questioning from the judge. So we must stress in the early stages of these developments today, the judge would have to accept this. The government would have to be willing participants in this before we can say that this is a degree of finality. But if this were agreed to, even then, this is not over for Hunter Biden. Certainly, this does lift a certain amount of weight from the shoulders of the family, but he does still have sentencing that he's awaiting for that prior conviction after the election in November in Delaware. So that would still be outstanding, but certainly some significant developments from the Biden family perspective today, Andrew.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Your perspective is so important because Joyce Vance bringing you in here to talk about all of these legal issues. As Mike points out, the judge has to accept this. The Delaware case, which was the gun felony case, and with the case that was going to resolve all these issues and avoid this tax charge from proceeding, that plea agreement fell apart. So what are the chances that the judge says, no, I'm not going to accept this, Alfred, let's go to trial? Or is this something that does benefit the government because they don't have to have an expensive trial tying up a judge in a courtroom? And all sides can agree, and it is at least an acknowledgement of guilt. He's not disputing that, but it's not a guilty plea. And the evidence won't be presented in all of its salacious aspects.
Right. So this is a win for the government. It is a conviction in the case, and in that sense, it's valuable to the government. But this isn't the normal kind of plea agreement we're used to seeing, where the government and the defendant work out a deal and the defendant acknowledges guilt. Here, Hunter Biden will maintain that he's not guilty, but he's pleading because it's in his best interests to do so, because he believes the government could get a conviction against him at trial. And so the judge will, and this is what happens in a normal plea agreement situation too, but the judge will question Biden very carefully to ensure that the plea is voluntary, that he understands the consequences, that he knows that he will face sentencing and possible time in custody. It'll be up to the judge whether or not to accept this sort of a plea. These aren't common in the federal system, but they are not unheard of. They're certainly something that the prosecutors will be authorized to sit in the courtroom and watch happen. But it's an unusual twist, and it's interesting that Biden appears to have given no notice to the government in advance of advising the court he intended to plead. Look, the last thing I'll say, Andrea, is that defendants in criminal cases always have a right to plead guilty. They can stand up in court, they can plead guilty to the indictment that they're charged in and take the consequences. But this is different from that, and it's different from the typical negotiated plea. This is a defendant saying, I'm not guilty, but it's in my best interests to plead, so that's what I'm going to do.
And just very briefly, in making this plea, if she were to accept it, we should also point out that the Biden defense has argued all along that most people who pay their back taxes in white-collar cases are not prosecuted, so that this was already, according to them, an unusual prosecution, which they said had some political implications. Joyce?
That's right, and that makes this plea a little bit surprising because Biden's attorneys seem to be preserving for the appeal their ability to make that kind of argument, that this was a selective or a vindictive prosecution, that Biden was treated differently than other similarly situated defendants, and perhaps the prosecution was motivated by political animus. But trial judges in the Delaware case had disallowed those arguments. They were rejected here. And it looks like when they were facing picking a jury, they decided it was truly in his best interests to enter this plea.
Okay, our thanks to Mike Memoli, Joyce hanging with us, and thanks to Sarah Fitzpatrick. And now we go back to the courthouse here in Washington. Presiding Judge Tanya Chutkan rejected Donald Trump's lawyers' attempts to argue that the November election should impact the pretrial schedule. The judge saying the court is not concerned with the election timeline. The special counsel has retooled its indictment to focus on Donald Trump's role as a candidate and private citizen, not as president. That's after that big immunity decision. The former president did not attend in person. He didn't have to. But his attorneys entered a not guilty plea to the superseding indictment on his behalf that came out just 2 weeks ago. Ken Delaney and Lisa Rubin are outside the courthouse here in Washington. Ken Delaney, what are the sides arguing when it comes to the key piece of argument, Mr. Trump's January 6th conversation with then Vice President Mike Pence?
Well, on that score, Andrea, and remember, this was a scheduling hearing, and we think we're going to see a ruling, a scheduling order from Judge Tanya Chutkan later today, so that's going to be consequential. On the question you just asked, though, about Vice President Pence, what the special counsel is arguing is that that conduct, Donald Trump's pressure on Vice President Pence to delay the certification, that's properly included in this indictment, despite the Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, because Donald Trump wasn't acting as the president when he did that. He was acting as a candidate. And Mike Pence wasn't acting as the vice president. He was acting as the president of the Senate in a ceremonial role. That's going to be hotly disputed. That's going to be one of the things they litigate before Judge Chutkan. What was really in dispute today, though, was the scheduling and the order of things. And the special counsel wants to deal with the immunity question first and foremost. And he wants to file a detailed brief, including possibly new evidence, including grand jury testimony and other kinds of evidence that the public hasn't seen before, in order to argue before Judge Chutkan about what conduct should properly be included in this indictment, what is presidential acts and what is not presidential acts. And, of course, Donald Trump's lawyers are pushing back against that. They want to delay. They are arguing that there should be other things that she deals with first, including the question of whether the special counsel's appointment was legal, something that in this D.C. circuit has never been entertained. And, in fact, the appeals court has ruled that special counsel appointments are kosher. In terms of tone and atmospherics, Judge Tanya Chutkan could not be more different than Judge Eileen Cannon down in Florida in terms of, as you said, making clear that Donald Trump's role as a presidential candidate and a former president has nothing to do with this criminal indictment. The public, as well as the defendant, has a right to a speedy trial in this case, and Judge Chutkan appears intent on moving this thing along, even though she knows that whatever she decides will be appealed before the trial all the way up to the Supreme Court. So she's not going to set a trial date, but she said she does intend to set a scheduling date later today, so we're going to learn more, perhaps, about how this case is going to proceed and what we will see before the November election. Andrea.
And Lisa Rubin, you were there inside the courtroom in this federal courthouse. So what struck you about the two sides and the judge's, conduct here and what she's going to entertain and what she's not going to do?
Well, Judge Chutkan was consummately prepared, Andrea, for today's status conference, going through methodically not only where the case has been, but what outstanding issues are still on her plate before asking the parties to talk about what the schedule should be going ahead with respect to immunity. But one thing that really struck me was not only the presence of the special counsel, Jack Smith, but how all eyes darted in his direction when John Lauro talked about his desire to brief the legitimacy of the special counsel's appointment and funding for his office. Jack Smith, he said, is an illegitimate prosecutor who has overseen an illegitimate indictment. Judge Chutkan sort of pushing back on that, and as Ken just said, reminding John Lauro that in this circuit, the D.C. Circuit, the U.S. Court of Appeals that oversees Judge Chutkan, has already long ago decided that a special counsel can be appointed by an attorney general consistent with the Constitution. The other thing that struck me, Andrea, was just what a difference oral argument can make, because it really crystallized the issues between the two parties. The special counsel's office telling Judge Chutkan that while in the ordinary course it's up to a defendant to move to dismiss an indictment or a superseding indictment, because of the immunity issues here and because specifically of their desire to litigate those issues all at once and have only one more round of appeals before trial, they want to put forward before her a brief that includes all of the evidence on which they're relying. That could be grand jury transcripts, as Ken noted. That could also be what are called FBI 302s, or memos memorializing interviews with witnesses early on in an investigation. And of course, it could take the form of lots of other kinds of evidence, most of which John Lauro maintained is sealed at present. And that's where we got into the election, because John Lauro was saying that the brief that the special counsel's office wants to file would put in front of the public inflammatory evidence at a particularly sensitive time. And when he said sensitive time, Judge Chutkan sat back in her seat and said, ah. And then she came back to it because she said, what you are alluding to, the pretext here, and that sensitive time is the election. And that, of course, is of no moment to the court.
Well, Joyce, what's really interesting here is with the first time we're seeing and hearing from her since the immunity ruling by the court, which barred Jack Smith, of course, from even mentioning Mr. Trump's alleged attempts to use the Justice Department to call Mike Pence. So they're going to put forward in those 302s all of this evidence that would have come out at trial. So this will be a way of possibly before November giving the public some indication of what the prosecution case is, assuming that she does rule as indicated that, you know, the prosecutor, that Jack Smith has the right to do that, although that could be appealed to the Supreme Court. Would that delay everything, including further pretrial hearings?
So it's messy, right? We're going to watch the sausage get made in discovery in this case, and it won't be pretty. And I think the reality is we don't know all of the answers yet about the timeline or how the process will work. It's very clear that Donald Trump's lawyers have one goal, that's delay. The special counsel has a very different goal. His goal is to limit the number of additional pretrial appeals to just one. So he wants to get all of these immunity questions out and presumably other issues involving motions to dismiss to the extent that they're appealable pretrial. He wants them all out now so that it can just go up in one more package, and then hopefully he will get to try his case. But here's the reality about discovery and evidence. You know, I think we need to push back a little bit on this notion that we're going to learn a lot of new things if the government's case is revealed before trial. We already know what happened. We lived through it. Might Jack Smith have a new witness, perhaps a cooperating co-defendant from the Trump camp? That's certainly possible because there are people who have pled guilty in some of the state cases. But I think we already know the contours of this case. And Judge Chutkan really put it best. When John Lauro tried to say that this was a case about the presidency, she said, no, this is a case about the 4 charges in this case. And her job right now is to take the Supreme Court's decision that expanded the contours of presidential immunity beyond what we knew and decide what evidence can still be heard at trial.
All such important points. Thank you so much, Ken Delanian, Lisa Rubin, Joyce Vance. We appreciate you all. And right now in New York City, former President Trump is giving a speech to the Economic Club of New York, where he's expected to call for a lower corporate tax rate and regulation cuts. This is the most important economic audience. It's all of Wall Street, in all of banking in the world, really. And it's a good chance for him to try to persuade them, and a lot of them back him, whatever his politics. They like his economic policies. We'll, of course, bring you any major news. And meanwhile, a terrible day in Georgia. A Georgia community mourning after a teen suspect opens fire at a high school, killing 4 people, 2 students, 2 teachers. We'll have the latest on the ground. That's coming next. This is Andrea Mitchell Reports. We're back in just 90 seconds. Don't go away. You're watching MSNBC.
air suspension, all-wheel steering, configurable terrain response, effortless in the extreme.
Vice President Kamala Harris is riding a wave of momentum.
It's challenging to understand how he is supposed to appeal to a general election electorate.
There are people that want what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are selling.
Don't miss the weekend, Saturday and Sunday mornings at 8
on MSNBC.
Today is a day of mourning in Georgia for the Georgia community around Appalachia High School after the latest horrific school shooting in our country. 2 students, both just 14 years old, 2 math teachers were killed. 9 others were wounded. They're expected to survive. The suspect, a 14-year-old, Colt Gray. He's going to be charged with murder and tried as an adult, which is why we are naming him. Law enforcement says he was interviewed by the FBI last year as a 13-year-old for making threats online, allegedly, to carry out a school shooting. Officials say there was no probable cause to arrest him at that time. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch in Winder, Georgia. I mean, Jesse, we've all been watching this for the last 24 hours. Just 24 hours since the shooting. How are people in Winder dealing with this horror?
Yeah, so Andrew, we went to a vigil last night, and I can tell you there were dozens of people. It was silent. I could hear the grass moving under people's feet. People were wiping away tears. There were candles lit, balloons released, and this community came together in prayer. And one of the things that caught my attention is one of the people up at the microphone leading people in this prayer asked not just for prayers for those who lost their lives, those who were injured, but also prayers for the person who is accused of carrying out this vicious crime. We have spoken with members of the community. I spoke with a 15-year-old who says she was a student who was in the school, heard and saw this horror unfolding. Here's part of what she shared.
It's really terrifying. It's like, how could somebody so young do that to over 30 people in less than 30 minutes of a span time? It's just terrific.
That teen told me, Andrea, that she says it doesn't matter what you do, there is no way to be safe in a school setting. And to hear that is such a stark reminder of where we are today.
Jesse Kirsch, thank you so much. The pain is throughout the country, but for that community, it's just profound. And coming up next, the Harris and Trump campaigns finally agreeing to debate rules for Tuesday. I'll talk to Harris's campaign senior national spokesperson Ian Sams about that and a lot more. That's coming up next. Stay with us. You're watching Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC.
The only thing on the road faster than a race car are rising car repair costs. But with Endurance, you'll never pay for covered car repairs again.
Just 2 claims saved us over $1,700.
If I didn't have Endurance, I would have paid over $7,000 out of pocket to repair my vehicle.
So make the call. Find out how much you could save with Endurance.
Call right now to get $300 off any plan. Call 1-833-440-3910 now.
Mom, Dad, the new school year is a chance to show off what I'm into. You know how I love dinos? How I talk about dinos all the time? Like at all 3 meals, in the car, through the bathroom door, blah, 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 dinos, dinos, dinos. Well, I've evolved, and it's all about sharks now. So for back to school, let's just focus on sharks and only sharks. And if it's not sharks, it's not for me.
Go beyond the headlines with the MSNBC app. Read, listen, and watch live breaking news and analysis anytime, anywhere. Go beyond the what to understand the why. Download the MSNBC app now.
Kamala Harris is in Pittsburgh today. She traveled to battleground Pennsylvania for debate prep and a few informal campaign stops, we're told. With only 5 days to go until the big showdown, the Vice President Donald Trump meeting on the debate stage for the first and perhaps only time. ABC News has announced that microphones will be muted when a candidate is not speaking. That was one of the disputed issues. And there will not be an audience in the debate hall. Joining us now, Ian Sams, senior national spokesperson for the Harris-Walz campaign, former White House official. Hey, Ian, it's great to see you. Thank you. I want to ask you, how is Vice President Harris preparing for this debate? Is she doing mocks in Pittsburgh now as well?
Look, she's preparing for this debate to share her vision of the country with the American people. A lot of times this might be the first time a lot of people hear from her on a debate stage. I think you mentioned the fact that the Trump campaign insisted on having the microphones muted in the debate on Tuesday night. I think that you can see that that's clearly a concentrated effort by President Trump to create a parameter to let him be more disciplined and more careful in his approach. I think people might be underestimating his ability in the debate, given the structure and format of those muted microphones. He lies so much that it's hard to fact check him in real time, whether you're a moderator or a candidate running against him. And so I think his handlers worked really hard to make sure that those mics stay muted to put him in a better position to be successful. I mean, this is his 7th general election presidential debate, probably the most of anybody in history. And Donald Trump's a showman, so we know he's going to come in ready to debate. And the vice president is preparing very hard to share with the country her vision for a new way forward and the very significant differences between she and President Trump in this campaign.
Well, you and the vice president know better than anyone, other than Joe Biden, how important, how significant these confrontations can be, for good or for not. James Carville, Democratic guru, has suggested that she ought to be getting under his skin. And clearly what is working for you so far in the last couple of weeks is her ridicule, not taking his taunts seriously, sort of dismissing him and all of his disparaging insults, that she's not intelligent, and the remarks about gender, which she didn't respond to in that one-on-one interview. Is that the game plan, to just kind of dismiss him and prompt him to go off message, prompt him to be less disciplined?
Well, I think what's really challenging and unfortunate about this debate format is that it limits the vice president's ability to prosecute the political case against President Trump. People remember so clearly in the Senate when she would have Trump officials or judicial nominees in front of the Judiciary Committee, the way she's able to incisively question someone to try to draw out the truth and really put facts on the table. Unfortunately, because of the insistence by Trump's campaign to have the microphones muted, up to what we believe was threatening to pull out of the debate, we thought the debate was more important to have so the American people can see the choice. But it is unfortunate that she won't be able to go after him with that sort of prosecutorial line of questioning to hold him accountable in this debate. We know he's going to try to mislead the country about where he stands. We know he's going to push negative attacks on the vice president. But, she's going to be ready to tell the American people the truth, to respond to his claims about her, and to share her vision with the country. But I think it does create a challenge that we aren't going to be able to have the ability to sort of go directly at these claims made by President Trump, or to try to hold him accountable for his own misstatements and, frankly, offensive sort of attacks against her.
Now, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, famously, of course, the co-chair of the January 6th investigation, just endorsed Kamala Harris last night. Here's what she had to say at Duke University.
I don't believe that we have the luxury of writing in candidates' names, particularly in swing states. And as a conservative, as someone who believes in and cares about the Constitution, I have thought deeply about this. And because of the danger that Donald Trump poses, not only am I not voting for Donald Trump, but I will be voting for Kamala Harris in this election.
How do you think that the Liz Cheney endorsement might help you?
Well, look, Congresswoman Cheney is a patriot, and I think in the last 5 years, we've seen over and over again her put country over party, or as John McCain would say, to put country first. And I think that the vice president really respects these Republicans, these true conservatives who are having the courage to speak out and to say that what we see from President Trump is unacceptable, and we can't select him in this election. We have to choose a new way forward. We have to turn the page on what he has represented, the chaos, the division, the erosion of our freedoms and constitutional ideals. You know, she welcomes the support of anyone in this country who is tired of what President Trump is offering. And I think that she's offering a big, bold, inclusive vision for any voter, whether you're on the right, left, or somewhere in between, to support her. And so, you know, we think that this is momentum that we can keep up right now with Republicans who are speaking up and coming out and saying that they're going to support Vice President Harris. We welcome them in this campaign, and we hope this is a campaign that they can believe in.
Ian Sams, thank you so very much today. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
And joining us now is NBC News White House senior correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, former chief strategist for the 2024 Bush-Cheney campaign, Matthew Dowd, and former Democratic New York Congressman Joe Crowley. So, Kelly, first to you. We both know Liz Cheney. She's going a step beyond what other anti-Trump Republicans have said, not just that she's not, you know, that she's going to sit out the election. She said she is going to vote for Kamala Harris. What's the significance of that shift? And do you think this helps with, let's say, independent voters, suburban women, you know, Nikki Haley voters?
Well, she also described herself as still very much a conservative and very devoted to the Constitution in the same breath in which she said she would vote for Kamala Harris. And that is clearly about saying that she's not changing her views, but she is making a choice. And as she outlined, that if you're in a battleground state like here in Pennsylvania, writing in a name, which is an option certainly plenty of anti-Trump Republicans could do, that the margin could be so close that it really needs to be a binary choice in her view. Now, the campaign for Harris and Wallace is trying to use this as one of many, and certainly the most prominent, Republican who had held elective office, and of course the family dynasty of her father, who had served as vice president and in many senior roles in other Republican White Houses, that this is an invitation to those other voters who might be Nikki Haley voters, might be in the Republican Party but uncomfortable, and a way to say that this is outreach to those voters. So as we heard at the convention, where one of the Republicans who spoke said voting for Harris does not make you a Democrat, it is an opportunity to just express a choice in this election. So they're trying to retain that sense that people who have voted Republican, may believe in more conservative principles, can vote for her. Now, many of them may not line up on issues, but if it is a choice between the former president, if they're uncomfortable, then this gives them an option. That's certainly how the Harris-Wallace campaign wants to frame this, and they say they welcome Liz Cheney's support. Andrea?
And Matthew Dowd, what do you make of this endorsement? Because right now, Donald Trump is speaking to the Economic Club of New York. He's got all of Wall Street there. He's got a lot of support in the business community. And so on the issues, there's a split. Right now, he's emphasizing energy, that he's going to make energy, you know, amazing. And clearly that they've been talking a lot about Pennsylvania, fracking. She's in Pittsburgh. She had been against fracking. That's one of the issues that you could expect in the debate. But also tax policy. This is really important to the business community. And she is now split with Joe Biden. It's one of her first disagreements. And she is going for not as big a change in the capital gains tax, that she would give them more favorable treatment, the business community. Not as favorable as Trump, but not as anti-business, if you will, if I can characterize it, as Joe Biden.
Well, I'd like to split the way we look at this into two parts of this. There's one part is the business community, and the other part is extremely wealthy people. The extremely wealthy people are different than the business community, even though there's some overlap. Donald Trump's tax policy is beneficial for the extreme wealthy of the country, as we've learned in this. It's not necessarily beneficial for the business community. And I think, as we saw from Goldman Sachs announcing that the GDP will grow if Vice President Harris wins, it will decline if Donald Trump wins. I think most of the Fortune 500 wants, even though they stay out of this and to a large degree, would prefer a Harris administration because it's less chaotic, it's predictable, it follows the rules, it stays within the boundaries of where we are, which is, it makes her a unique coalition that she's built of sort of the Fortune 500 along with labor in this. But Donald Trump has peeled off some of the Silicon Valley billionaires, some of the more really wealthy people who, in my view, have no interest in the common good in the country. They're only interested in their own good and in their own wealth. And I think that's the argument she can make. She can say, I'm interested, my policies are for the common good. Donald's policies are for a select few people in the country.
And Joe Crowley, weigh in on this, because well, she was making the argument in New Hampshire yesterday, in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She was talking about small business and how she's going to help them more. I mean, she's trying to do that, but what she's trying to do is combat this, you know, you have to say, on the surface of it, really phony argument from Donald Trump, which he was making again today, that she's some sort of communist Marxist. They've ridiculed her. Elon Musk put up this artificial intelligence, really outrageous, you know, social media post portraying her as Comrade Harris. Let me play some of Donald Trump in New York just now at the Economic Club, and get you on the other side.
Kamala Harris is the first major party nominee in American history who fundamentally rejects freedom and embraces Marxism, communism, and fascism. You're learning about this. You'll find out nobody knew who she was. Just a few months ago, they didn't know who she was. She is promising communist price controls, wealth confiscation, energy annihilation, reparations, the largest tax increase ever imposed.
Well, to disaggregate that, I remember Richard Nixon, a well-known non-communist during the Cold War, proposing price controls to the dismay of many mainstream economists. Any case, and he has also, you know, done some of those same proposals himself. I can't fact-check it in real time, but
what I find really interesting here, though, Andrea, is that he has just called her both a communist and a fascist. You know,
this is
obviously didn't take, you know, American Politics 101.
But this is a very sophisticated audience. This is the New York Economic Club.
And they know exactly who Kamala Harris is. They know her as a former prosecutor, as a former senator, and now as the vice president. They're not going to be fooled by this, but this speech is not for them. Right. They know they're speaking to a broader audience. And look, you know, at one time I've heard it said in the past, if you want to live like a Republican, vote Democrat. And I think that's what Kamala Harris is saying as well. It's like, yeah, I'm not the boogeyman. I'm going to come in. I'm going to do what's right for our country. I want to help build our economy. I want to help small businesses. I want to help our economy grow. And just like Goldman Sachs said, the chances are that if you vote Democrat in this election, our economy, our GDP will grow. If you vote Republican, it will not.
Well, Kelly O'Donnell, let's get back to the debate prep then, because the rules are going to be the same as they were in the previous debate. We showed how Donald Trump in the previous debate, no matter what he was asked, he answered about immigration. And Joe Biden, you know, we know what that looked like. So how is she preparing? Because she can't be the prosecutor. Ian Sams kind of acknowledged that. She can't go after him and jump in. The mics will be closed. So how does she prepare and be as disciplined as he very well may be?
Well, preparing is the reason we're in Pittsburgh today, Andrea, and some senior members of her team are already here in downtown Pittsburgh. She will be arriving soon to spend a few days here to have focused preparation and to have the benefit of being in a battleground state where if she chooses to go get a cup of coffee or stop at a local business, she'll get a lot of local attention in a state where every vote will be critical come November. So using the time for two purposes, getting ready for the debate and also doing by extension a battleground presence. But without the microphones in the configuration that her team wanted, again, separate from what President Biden had wanted, which was the muted microphones because of his different way of wanting to process the information and to contest Donald Trump. This will put some challenges to her. But at the same time, her team says that they believe that there will be a couple of things that will help that. There will be a press pool in the venue who can listen if there is over talk between the two candidates and hear that even if the audience at home doesn't, and that there could be some circumstances, the Harris campaign says, of turning the mics on if there is significant over talk. But she'll have to prepare for the rules as they are, which also include no prompts, no notes, and there'll be standing, which is pretty typical for these debates. But the work will be happening right here in Pittsburgh for this debate. And, of course, she's been doing work in Washington, D.C. to get ready for this as well. But it'll be focused here, and it will, of course, lead into Philadelphia hosting the debate next week. So it will be a challenge. They have never met in person, as you know, and so she will be preparing with the help of a colleague who will be playing Donald Trump with all of the affects and bravado and the style that colleague has studied of Donald Trump to help get her in the mindset to be ready for that, to make her case and to be able to pivot off of whatever he says. And they've certainly been studying the kinds of attacks they've made on her, which are in many cases quite personal, and how she'll respond to that. Andrea?
Yeah, and then with Hillary Clinton, it was Philippe Rines playing Donald Trump, and we know how aggressive he got. Long time Hillary.
It's him again, and he's doing it again. Yeah.
Matthew Dowd and Philippe Rines is doing it again. Former Congressman Joe Crowley. Yes. Thanks to all of you. And from election season to football season, it's finally back. Tonight is the night. Watch the Ravens and the Chiefs. We don't know about Taylor Swift. That's TBA. Starting at 7 Eastern, and tomorrow, same time, watch the Packers and the Eagles. All of it on your local NBC station and streaming only on Peacock. And up next, while the Justice Department clamps down on Russian election interference, Vladimir Putin says he's rooting for one specific candidate in the U.S. election, and you will not believe who that is. Former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster joining us next. A lot more coming up. Stay with us. This is Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC.
Saturday, September 7th, it's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event with your favorite MSNBC hosts. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets.
Michael lost 20 pounds with LifeMD.
I've always wanted to lose weight, but I never figured out the right way to do it. I asked a couple buddies, I said, how do I lose this weight? And the guy goes, LifeMD. Got on the computer immediately, and probably the easiest thing I've ever done. The medication comes in the mail, and it's very easy to use. I've been able to live my normal lifestyle, and I've lost 20 pounds already. I now spend time with my kids, and I've never felt better. It changed my life.
Get started with lifemd.com/TV. Your insurance may cover your medication for as low as $25 a month, plus the cost of care.
Your hair can grow 590 miles over your lifetime. It's in your nature to grow. Nature's Bounty helps you grow thicker, fuller hair with just one capsule a day. You are bountiful. It's in your nature. Nature's Bounty.
Whether it's your future health, your future income, or your future happiness, becoming an AARP member today can help. Join now for just $9 per year with a 5-year term and get a second membership free. Plus, you'll receive an insulated trunk organizer. Call or go online today, because the younger you are, the more you need AARP.
Why do couples choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
I need help with their snoring.
Sleep Number does that.
Thank you.
During our biggest sale of the year, save 50% on the Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Shop now at a Sleep Number store near you.
Introducing MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts. Get early access and ad-free listening to Rachel Maddow's chart-topping original podcasts, exclusive bonus content, and new episodes of The Rachel Maddow Show and Morning Joe ad-free. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Vladimir Putin accused just yesterday by the Justice Department of trying to help the Trump campaign. Today said that he is supporting none other than Kamala Harris, explaining he likes her, quote, infectious and expressive laugh. Of course, Donald Trump has repeatedly ridiculed Harris's laugh. And U.S. intelligence agencies say the Kremlin prefers Trump because of Trump's skepticism about supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia. The U.S. accused Russia on Wednesday of trying to help the Trump campaign with 5 Russian state-funded media outlets, including RT, or Russia Today, which was sanctioned by the State Department as a propaganda machine a year ago. The Justice and Treasury Department also accusing 2 RT employees of bankrolling an online Russian propaganda campaign. RT's press office derided the charge, writing, "ha, ha, ha," in all caps, and adding, 2016 called and it wants its cliches back. Well, aside from that kind of derision, joining me now is retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster, a former national security advisor for then President Trump, and his new book is At War with Ourselves, My Tour of Duty in the Trump White House, which is remarkable. So, first of all, it's great to see you, H.R. Let's talk about.
Great to be with you, Andrea.
Well, I've been looking forward to this so much. I want to talk to you about Vladimir Putin's claims. He's smirked and he said he prefers Kamala Harris. All of our intelligence agencies saying that Russia is actively preferring and supporting Donald Trump. That was the basis of their charges yesterday.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, he's an operator, and what he's doing is doing everything he can to undermine our confidence in our democratic process and in our institutions. When I haven't read the whole report yet, but it's quite well done. What I think, though, Andrea, this is a setup, right? It's a setup. I really don't think that Vladimir Putin cares who wins our elections as long as large numbers of Americans doubt the legitimacy of the result. So I think what we all can do is not fall for it this time. I mean, we know what his playbook is. They get more and more adept at it. And I think that, his statement yesterday, the activities of the GRU and the SVR and these intelligence organizations that are running this influence campaign, really what they want to do is erode our common identity as Americans, pit us against each other, and reduce our confidence in who we are and in our institutions.
And we're focusing on Russia because that Vladimir Putin came out today. But of course, we want to point out that Merrick Garland and the government is saying that China, Iran also actively trying to influence our campaign by focusing on false, disagreements, promoting disagreements and infighting in the U.S. as well. Putin today also claimed that Ukraine's incursion in the north of the northern border there has failed to slow Russia's advances. Was that incursion a mistake, given that Russia has retaliated big time? Do you worry that also Trump is going to help Putin, if Trump is elected, force Ukraine into making concessions and basically surrendering its independence?
Audrey, I'm concerned about sustained support for Ukraine. I think it was a good decision to make the incursion and to get out, from under the electromagnetic warfare and air defense umbrella, so that the Ukrainians could strike, at some of these long-range assets that they were being bombarded with impunity. I think really what's necessary at this stage is to lift some of the restrictions, on the munitions and weapon systems we've provided, and to build the confidence of the Ukrainians that they will have sustained support. And I do worry about President Trump's desire for a big deal. I mean, I think, Putin, plays everybody, right? He's an operator, and he'll appeal to the President Trump, if he gets reelected, to his desire to have some kind of a big deal and to have some kind of an entente with Putin. But, Putin is determined. He's determined to drag everybody else down under the theory that he can be sort of the last man standing and can restore Russia to national greatness. He's told us that with the essay that he penned just a few months before he conducted the massive reinvasion of Ukraine. So I think we have to take him at his word to recognize that a ceasefire is not going to solve the problem in Ukraine unless Ukraine can regain the initiative and initiate some sort of a negotiated settlement under favorable conditions. I mean, I think what we've seen is Putin has decided, hey, he can't have all Ukraine thanks to the valor and the sacrifices of the Ukrainians. But he's decided, well, if I can't have Ukraine, Ukraine can't have Ukraine either. And we're going to see this continued onslaught until Ukraine's allowed to not only shoot down the arrows that are coming at them in the form of these glide bombs and missiles, but also have the opportunity to kill the archer on the other end with some of these longer range systems.
And of course, Putin, we should point out to anyone who doesn't know that, is former KGB, the predecessor of the FSB. So he was an intelligence guy for his whole career in East Germany prominently. Turn to the war in Gaza quickly, because U.S. officials, the Israeli defense minister, the spy agencies, they're all clearly frustrated. The Prime Minister Netanyahu, they say, is raising so many obstacles that there can't be a ceasefire, there can't be a hostage release. I mean, we know Hamas is at fault for starting this and could release the hostages at any time. That's a given. But at this point, NBC is reporting that the U.S. is considering options to try to deal through our partners with Hamas directly for a limited hostage release of the American surviving hostages and some others. Is that smart right now, given that our ally, the Israeli Prime Minister, is ignoring his people, his defense minister, and everyone else, and refuses to concede?
Well, Andrew, I have a different perspective on this, and I understand the arguments in favor of pushing hard for a ceasefire at this moment, for the humanitarian purpose of stopping the suffering of innocents and getting the release of the hostages. But really, Andrew, I don't think there's any other option but to destroy Hamas. And the reason for this is that Hamas still has the guns in Gaza. And a new political order in Gaza, a Palestinian political order, cannot emerge as long as they are still a viable
What about the
organization.
fact that the defense minister, Gallant, says, and the intelligence say they can't be destroyed, quote, destroyed, you've done as much as you can?
Well, Sinwar is still alive, right? And these leaders are still hiding, probably in Khan Yunis, they think, at the moment. So I think they have to be hunted down. Because they deserve to be hunted down after the heinous attacks of October 7th and so many acts of murder and terrorism before and after that. But there can't be, if you care about, there's a lot of talk about, hey, can we ever get on a path to a two-state solution? Can there be an enduring peace between Israel and the Palestinians? You can't get on that track as long as Hamas is in control of Gaza. And so if you believe in some kind of a two-state solution, that step A to get there has to be the destruction of Hamas, the emergence of a new security order in Gaza, maybe a multinational one with the Emiratis and Egyptians and others pitching into that to give space for a new political order to emerge there. Andrew, if you say, hey, I'll be the mayor of Gaza, guess what's going to happen? Within a few minutes, is you're going to get a bullet in the head. So I think that people are looking past, that fundamental precondition for any kind of enduring peace, and to get rid of the organization, Andrea, that has diverted so much assistance from the Palestinian people into its terrorist infrastructure, an organization that really is committed to destroying Israel and killing all the Jews. That doesn't sound like they're signing up for a two-state solution to me. So I just think, I know it's not what you normally hear these days. Of course, I would welcome a ceasefire that leads to to the elimination of Hamas and this new order, to give space for a new order to emerge. But that's not what the Hamas leaders have in mind.
Let me ask you a couple of quick questions. In your book, you talk about a 13-day trip to Asia, during which former President Trump, he was tired, he was irritated, he was aged. He's now 78. Do you think he has the stamina and focus to be president?
Well, I'm not with him now. Just as like you and I are both looking at him, it seems like he can get around fine. He has plenty of energy at his to be studiously nonpartisan. You know, Andrea, I remember back to, I think it was April of 2021, when President Biden went to Area 60 to announce the complete withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I thought, hey, how can he think that's a good idea? You know, standing among those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and then to say, hey, we're just going to withdraw from Afghanistan. So I think this is indicative for both President Trump and President Biden. There's a real disconnect between even our most senior political leaders and understanding. They don't understand really why America's warriors fight, why we serve. And so I think we need to maybe educate ourselves about the professional military ethic.
And that is what you do in That War with Ourselves. It's a great book, retired General H.R. McMaster. Thank you so much.
Andrew, you know you're in that book. Do you know you're in that book? I didn't name you, but do you know the scene in Mellon Auditorium when I saw you? So I want to thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And that does it for us for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports. Chris Chansing Report starts after a quick break.
I got my together. I got my together.
The whole class knows I got my together.
Just say it. You can get your shots together, too. Your COVID-19 shot and your flu shot at the same visit as recommended by the CDC.
I got my shots together, dude.
Ask your healthcare provider about getting this season's COVID-19 shot when getting your flu shot if you're due for both.
Are you getting your together?
What's a great place to find affordable luxury for less? There's beautiful linen sheets, there's gorgeous curtains, whatever your style is. The quality for what you get is really substantial, and that's one of the reasons that I've been drawn to this brand.
Get $20 off your first purchase at quince.com.
Looking for a way to stretch the dollar? With Insurify, you can cut your car insurance bill in half. Scroll through dozens of prices and tap to switch online. That's it. No phone calls and no wasted time. Go to Insurify and save today.
We just signed the lease on our third shop. My assistant went to customink.com to get new uniforms with all the locations. He found great products, uploaded new art, and had boxes sent to all the shops. Custom Ink makes it so easy. Get started today at customink.com.
I need Q1 full index reports to my desk by noon, complete with comprehensive data analysis.
Are you getting any of
this? Charles.
Yep, Otter's got the meeting notes. I'll ask it for action items in the channel. And Maria already asked for a budget reminder. Smart.
By morning. Got it?
Got it, boss. Otter, you got this.
Why do couples choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
I need it a little cool.
And I need it a lot of cool.
We're both cool like that.
Sleep Number does that. Actively cools and warms on each side. The Queen Sleep Number C2 smart bed is only $9.99. Shop now at a Sleep Number store near you.
We just signed lease on our third shop. My assistant went to customink.com to get new uniforms with all the locations. He found great products, uploaded new art, and had boxes sent to all the shops. Custom Ink makes it so easy. Get started today at customink.com.
Good day, I'm Chris Chansing, live at MSNBC headquarters in New York City. Moving ahead. For the first time in 325 days, lawyers argued former President Donald Trump's January 6th case before a judge. The clues we got on how fast the judge wants to move this case and the way Mike Pence might be involved going forward. Plus, a huge shock inside a different courtroom. Hunter Biden's tax trial stopped in its tracks today. The president's son now set to change his plea. What the reversal might mean for the case when it picks up in about an hour. And on their radar, the FBI reveals the 14-year-old suspected Georgia school shooter was questioned for online threats just last year. So how did this still happen? A lot to get to, but we begin here. With just 61 days until the election, Judge Tanya Chutkan, overseeing Donald Trump's big election interference case, making it clear that, quote, this court is not concerned with the electoral schedule. Jack Smith's case was upended by the landmark Supreme Court ruling on immunity, and there are lots of questions still to be answered. When will this trial over actions involving the January 6th insurrection actually start? No trial date was set today. What role will Mike